Section 13.4 then picks up with this idea of motivation. So before we jump into this, just have a think about perhaps what motivates you guys at work. Is it the fact that you get paid at the end of the month, or is it because you like the company, or is it because you like the people you work with, or do you feel like you're on a path to something a bit better? Do you feel like you're going to better yourself throughout your employment? Now, all of those are absolutely fine motivators, and in fact we're going to see as we work through this section that it might not just be a case of what motivates you throughout your career, but maybe what motivates you at different stages. So maybe right in your first job, maybe it is money, maybe it is the main motivator, but by the time you get further into your career, maybe then you're looking for something slightly different. Now, the first model that we're going to look at here is by Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Very, very popular, very famous model around motivation, and hopefully we're going to see at least certain parts of this are going to link back to your own motivation. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as it sounds, it was a way of working through different levels of motivation. So the argument was, you started kind of down at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, and as you started to be more and more motivated and enjoy your job more and more, you worked your way through these various levels. So it's really just a timing issue. So what we're going to do is just run through this hierarchy, just make sure we're happy with what all of these different levels are, and then we'll move on and start thinking about how Maslow compared with some of these other theorists that we're going to see. So as I said, Maslow said that you tend to start off by trying to satisfy these most basic needs, so basic or physiological needs. So, for example, I know that I need food. I know that I need shelter. Okay, so the very basic human needs. So if I have those things, yes, I'm going to be reasonably happy, but they are very basic. They are things that we kind of almost expect to have. So we go to work, we initially are trying to satisfy these very basic needs. Once we've satisfied those basic needs, then once we have food and shelter and clothing and so on, we move into the next level. So we move into these safety or security needs. Now, safety in this context can mean two things. It can mean, for example, job security. So am I just trying to make sure that I'm not going to get sacked tomorrow? That will make me reasonably motivated. And also things like security equipment or safety equipment, sorry. So for example, a hard hat if I'm working on a building site. Okay, so not just physical safety equipment, but also this idea of job security. So again, I go to work, I've got to satisfy my basic needs, and I've got to satisfy these safety or security needs. And once I've passed through that level, then I'm on to the social needs. And social needs is all about working as a team. And what we really strive for, according to Maslow, was that you really wanted to work with like-minded people. And I'm sure you've spoken to people or you've experienced it yourself, where you ask somebody if they like their job, and sometimes they'll say, well, I don't really like the job, but I really like the people I work with. So you could argue that they're satisfying these social needs by working with people that they enjoy working with. As we move on to the next two levels, then we really are moving towards those kind of really high levels of motivation. So the next one is status or ego needs, and this is all about trying to be recognized. So for example, if I've received some sort of recognition from a superior on a nice piece of work that I've done, or maybe I get a promotion, so I'm being recognized by being given more responsibility, for example, at work. The final level then, self-actualization, was this pinnacle, this real overall target, and it sounds pretty grand, but what Maslow really was looking for here was, does my life have any meaning? Okay, so is it all worth it? Am I getting to where I need to be? Now, the problem with Maslow's hierarchy is, you could argue that there are plenty of people who would have received this kind of recognition or promotion, so people who work towards the top of most organizations, and you could ask them if they're happy and they could say no. So it really does assume that everyone's kind of following this same path. Now, although Maslow doesn't necessarily mention money specifically, it's obviously very important in terms of providing some of these things. So it's not necessarily important until it becomes, for example, something that helps me to satisfy my basic and safety needs. Okay. So it's not necessarily something that he specifically talked about, but actually it's something that's quite important to some of those lower levels of the hierarchy itself. Now, this idea of certain needs being much more basic than others kind of carries forward into our next theorist, Herzberg. And Herzberg split his theory into two different factors. So we've got hygiene factors and we've got motivating factors. Now, hygiene factors were quite basic. So these are all about the context of the job rather than the content of the job. So, for example, what my salary is. So again, we've got that nice kind of economic need kind of down towards the lower end here. The relationship with other staff, working conditions, are they nice, kind of supervision and so on. Now, these weren't things that would motivate you on their own, but actually their absence would demotivate you. So it was kind of essential that these things were in place. Now, motivating factors were all to do with the content, so what I actually do. So is my job challenging? Do I have any responsibility? Do I have the ability, the option to do better, to go further within the organisation? Obviously, depending on whether I'm doing well or not. Now, if we consider what Maslow's hierarchy of needs look like, well, if I were to draw it out here on the right, if you consider those kind of lower level needs, like safety needs, like those basic or physiological needs, maybe even some of those social needs, well, they're really kind of matching up nicely here with Herzberg's hygiene factors. And if you consider those higher end needs, the status, the ego, the self-actualization, they're really going to link a bit more with the motivating factors that Herzberg spoke about. So two reasonably similar theories overall, and a real kind of common theme running through them. So the fact that we have these lower level needs that need to be met initially, and then we move on to things that are perhaps a bit more sophisticated. So that's dealt with the two main motivation theories that we really need to know for this course: Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then Herzberg's content theory, so hygiene and motivating factors. In the next recording, then, we'll move on to group behaviour. So rather than just considering how people behave on their own, starting to think about how groups are formed and the different roles that perhaps people need to be given or to fulfil within a group.